Get ready because today is going to be a good one. We're going to challenge the price to book ratio first, but also we're going to challenge finance as a whole, as an industry, and we're going to look under the hood to see if what we serve as data and information is actually reliable. We're going to start challenging the whole industry. I'm Alberto, and my goal is to find the best investment strategy for you and your business. And to do that, I use data, backtest, and of course, a little bit of my own experience. So if you are ready to Jindex, welcome to Just Press the Hole. Today we're going to look into the price to book ratio, which is one of the most used value data points and reference out there. And what is value? We already had a deep dive in the first video. So this is a second video of a series dedicated to value. So if you didn't see the first video, please go out and check that out first. I would recommend to see that first, just because we did delve into a little bit of the details, what value means and what are the implications for what we're doing. But in long story short, we did look into price to earning ratio, especially projected price to earning ratio last time. And what we're going to do today is to actually look into the price to book ratio, which is taken directly from the Morningstar informational box. This is Jasper's door, and this is a perfect occasion to check into what have been proposed. Is there actually something behind it, or they're just following the herd, they're just following what everyone else is doing? And the reason why we use this box in particular is because not just is very popular, but also it contains all the elements that gives us latitude to experiment and to truly learn about this factor. And also because it's out there on every website that talks about ETF as a reference for you to better understand what is contained into the ETF. And therefore, you should probably better understand why it exists and how it is calculated. And how it's calculated is simply out there in these beautiful documents that Morningstar put in our hands. And we are gonna go through all the value the value data points that they provide, so all the way down to that dividend yield that makes no sense to me, but we're going to test it and see if it's actually something that we can use. And of course, the other side, we're going to go through growth and see if that is a factor first, and we're going to test all those data points to see if there's something there that we can use. So I'd like to invite you to stick around up to the end, because what we're going to see today is absolutely valuable for you as an investor, not just the strategy, but for you as an investor and the way you think about finance itself. So again, we're going to test price to book ratio, and we introduced today's Jindex to do all that I said before. A Jindex, if this is your first time here, a Jindex is nothing else but a DIY investable index. That means that you're not going to leave it to the banks, you're not going to leave it to your money manager, you're not going to leave it to your private banker to decide what to do with your money. You're going to build a portfolio that matches your goals, that does not pay any fees to the banks, and take care of what is your first priority, which is yourself. Okay, do not trust anyone else but yourself in finance. This is rule number one. And to do that, we're going to use a Jindex that is including the global stocks, but they are sorted by price to book ratio. Again, we're going to flip it. At the very bottom, first decile, we got value. At the very top, we got growth. And in between, we got that continuum of stocks in equal groups. We expect the first decile to be a fuck yeah factor, which is very good with great returns. Super bad factors at the top with growth stocks that should suck. And in the middle, we got something that should be very meh. The whole Jindex in one shot, it's going to be global. It's going to be a random choice of stocks within each of the decile, and obviously we're going to talk about price to book ratios. Number of stocks for each Jindex is going to be 50, and is going to be refreshed every 6 months from 2000 to 2025. Each decile we're going to iterate 5 times, just to make sure we don't have any outliers that may ruin the data or may actually skew the data. And if you want to replicate this whole experiment at home, you're going to find the code in the description. Just get in there. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want you to trust the data, but also I want like you to be more practical and learn out of what is an actual experiment with live data that, by the way, are provided by Morningstar. And in the video today, in this little short race to the top, we're going to see the first decile in yellow there, fifth decile, green decile is the 10th, and then of course we got the random. Random is just a control group. So if we are dealing with an actual factor, we do expect the first decile to outperform the random control group and the 10th decile to not outperform the control group. Why don't we use the S&P 500? Well, the S&P 500 is first just American, so it's not going to be a good reference point for the global Jindex that we're using today, but also because random, both global and US only, will outperform the S&P 500. Not a joke. This is a true story. Go check the first video. We tested extensively, and no matter what you do, random will outperform the S&P 500. We're going to see why today, but for now, let's see what price to book ratio is going to do to our Jindex. And there we have it. This is beyond any expectations. And in fact, the returns are so huge that we can barely see the fifth decile, the 10th decile, and the random control group. So we're going to move it to the logarithmic scale, and we're going to see that exactly what we thought we would see. First, outperforming at all times the first decile, and also the random outperforming the 10th decile and the 5th decile, which is what we expected. But in order to see actually if this is a factor, what we're going to do now is to move to this chart, and you're going to see the returns compared to the decile. And this is where you see this is 100% a factor that you can invest in. And for that, what I mean is simply the more exposure you have to this characteristic, the higher the expected returns. And therefore, if you play along and you invest with the first decile, you expect something north of 25% of returns, right? And all the way down, the farther away you get from there, the lesser the return. And you can see on the top right, there's a little bit of a spike with the 10th decile. That's where the big ones are sitting. That's where the S&P 500 is sitting. And you can totally tell there's a little bit of a spike there just because there's a lot of money going in artificially pumping the price. We're going to compare with the volatility. Again, we're going to see the first decile above 20. That's high volatility, but not as high as the 10th decile. So we do expect some volatility, but again, when you compare it with the Sharpe ratio, which keeps in consideration both the returns and the volatility, there's no match. This is a beautiful, great way to push your expected returns in the stock market. And we think we did solve investing. Yay! That said, what do we learn? Again, we're going to split this in two sides. This is actually the interesting part of the video. We're going to go a little bit superficially on what the price to book ratio teaches us, which is already on the screen, but also we're going to have a deep dive on what actually is driving the price and what actually is giving us this result, and what that means in the biggest context of finance, right? So, of course, if value investing works, we proved it already twice now in a series of 5 videos. We already proved it twice, which is a great start for value. But also, we know that if we want to expose ourselves to this kind of factor, we want to stick to the top 2 deciles. better if you stick with the first decile altogether. And of course, price to book confirms itself as a reliable way to calculate value. Now, this is the chart from today, but also this is a tremendous amount of returns. I cannot justify in my own cautions this to a single factor. So what I did is I did a little bit of research and figured out what is that was going on. And of course, value is great, but also if you drill down in what is the average price to book value for each of the decile, you see that in the first decile you buy at a significant discount, not on the cash flow, like Warren Buffett would do, to actual tangible asset that goes into the books. Now, granted, companies that have valuation this low usually are either in trouble or very young. So diversification up to 50 stocks can be actually the way to go here. If we try this again with probably 20 stocks, which is the bare minimum of diversification I would recommend, that would probably show much more volatility. But one of the reasons that we get these big results is you get at least 40% discount on the asset, which is a lot. And the second thing is I've been checking is they overlap with small caps in terms of exposing these stocks to different factors. And when you buy the first decile for price to book ratio, it's quite obvious that you're overlapping with small caps. And that means that you are getting not just one factor pushing your returns up, but also the small cap premium, which had a significant return on that investment. And you put that all together and you get this amazing, this is a truly stunning chart. I didn't see anything like this in a while, and I've been studying a lot of charts. Now, what that tells us? Well, what happened if we start combining factors, right? We didn't do it on purpose, but it just happened that price to book would overlap with small caps we've seen, and that already pushed the returns that much, right? What would happen if we sit and absolutely what would happen if we sit and decide to combine all the other factors or use them as filters or maybe combine them together in order to push our returns? What would happen to our portfolio? How much more? Maybe it's just a matter of increasing returns like everyone would like to do, but also maybe it's a matter of reducing your volatility and sleep better at night, right? How the factors will work together. And that is the Jindex power. This is why we use the Jindex. We use something that we build for ourselves that is not based on our way to understand which stock will go up fast. We just use the same principle that guide the construction of an index, but we do it in a smart way. We don't follow what the banks need us to do. We don't follow what are the constrictions that the banks come with because of their own size. We just follow what is good for us, what is promising us the best return. And this is why we use the Jindex. Start thinking about that next time you want to build your own portfolio. And now we're going to switch gear and going to get into what think about when we think about the global finance. Now, I noticed in my years of working into it that there's a lot of follow the herd mentality. If someone fancy, someone we trust said something, everyone else just assumes is true. And the fancier you are, the better your information. In this case, whatever Morningstar says is true. Why? Because when we look up Morningstar, it's this massive firm. They do research, they do analysis, they do fund ratings, they do a lot that it tells us that they are absolutely expert, on top of moving $300 billion with a B, by having 10,000 very smart people working for them and ratings that are just unbelievable, 100%. Okay, these people are as trustworthy as it comes in the financial sector. And on top of it, their work is everywhere. But Can we trust them? Well, I don't think so. I would say absolutely fucking not. And the reason for that is this. Look, we did last time. We did this price to projected earnings check, and that was the result, right? That is 90% return compounded annual growth rate. That is an amazing result. This is incredible result. But we did check today the price to book ratio, and this was the result. This is much better. This is actually 26% return over time, and that is an astonishing 7% more. So don't trust everything just because someone tells you. Go and check for yourself. Trust only what you can prove. The problem with finance is that people's interest very rarely overlap with yours, and it doesn't matter if they have a tie, it doesn't matter if they work for a bank, it doesn't matter if they have a fancy report. What they do does not match with your own intent. So what you get as data, recommendation, ideas, most of the time is pure rubbish, and sometimes has some value, but it can be distorted by intent. Second point, know what you invest in. I would like to bring in this chart. Now, this chart is simply the average price to book ratio across the decile. Obviously, the biggest the stated decile, the highest the price to book ratio. So if your company had, say, a price to book ratio of 2, you will sit around the middle, the 5th decile. If you have something around 1.5%, you will probably be somewhere around the 1st and the 2nd decile. Now, pay very careful attention. S&P 500. This is the last 20 years, and we got anywhere in between 2 and 5.5 in terms of price to book value. Now, what that means for us, this is the range where the S&P 500 have been oscillating through in the last 25 years. And if we put it down to the x-axis, we're going to see that it's been sitting around the 5th and the 8th and something decile, right? Are you going in the same direction I'm going? Because if we go to the returns chart, and we're gonna sit those two values on the x-axis, right? This is the expected returns of the S&P 500, right? As long as you think this price to book ratio is actually a valid source of information about the companies that you're studying, that being the average of the S&P 500 is also the return that we expect. So what did the S&P 500 did in the last few years? It's actually 25 years, and the result is actually 8%. Now, where does that sit? They sit right there, that red line, which is actually underperforming what we expected it to do, which was good results, but not excessive, compared especially to the 1st and 2nd decile, right? Why is underperforming? My opinion is that nominal returns of the S&P 500 would be in the highlighted area as expected from the price to book ratio, but the cost of rebalancing daily an S&P 500, an index that is so big, is impressive, right? Of course, these are big institutions. They won't pay the retail price. They will pay something much cheaper. I would expect it to be anywhere 100 or 1,000 times cheaper than retail, but there are some costs, and those costs will weigh on the overall return of the S&P 500 as an index. That means that whatever the returns is, there's going to be a penalty, and we think, and I think, that that penalty is reflected in this underperformance that is on the screen right now. If everyone is selling the same thing, okay, this is probably the biggest takeaway. It's usually rubbish, because if it was good, they wouldn't be selling. This is finance. Everyone want to make money. But if they're selling it, is either the only thing they have or it's rubbish. And in case of the S&P 500, it's a little bit of both, because I would like you to be sitting on this side of the screen, on the 1st decile, getting returns above 20%. And I really don't understand why everyone else is thinking and only buying the 10th decile, where we do not expect good returns, where the math is against us, right? I would like to exhort you, like this is if you were to go out today and bring anything from this video with you, is think with your own head. Have that light on and look around, because not everything you've been served, and especially in finance, actually most of what you've been served, the S&P 500 is an institution everyone think is the best way to invest. I don't think it is. I don't think it is. The math said it's not what it is, and it's not complicated to create an alternative that will perform better. I am that proof that this is true, right? So, how does it compare with the rest of it? Well, it compares pretty well, I would say. I added the results in the Jindex leaderboard. You can find the results of the entire Jindex leaderboard, and also the data and the analysis that is behind each and every single one of those results at jaspersdo.com/leaderboard. There is a link in the description if you don't like to type. Yes, coming back to us. I would like you to walk away from this video thinking, oh, this is a great way to invest. Perfect, price to book ratio, done. But also having that feeling that maybe everything that we've been served so far, every single Twitter account that repeats the same thing over and over again, maybe you should look into it. Because honestly, I never saw an industry that is so fucked up as finance, right? Even the best investors, even those that are supposed to be the financially literate, and even less the bankers and the private investors and the people that is supposed to be at the fiduciary level that help you to manage your money, even those people, they are financially illiterate at best. They don't know how things work under the hood, but also they are not motivated by any means to sell you the best thing for you. They don't care about your best outcome as much as they care as their own bonuses, or in certain situations as much as they care of their own job. Like there's stories of many banks, and I will publish a video soon, that said that have been putting pressure on their sellers, on the private bankers, to push products that would make money for the bank. And you can see how that motivation would definitely bring them away from their own best intent. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm Alberto. My intention is to bring you and your business the best way to approach the market. And I do that with data analysis and also some good old backtest on top of my own experience. Please remember to subscribe. And of course, you are on Jasper's Door.